Now? Move. Now? Okay. So call the meeting to order, the subsequent meeting at 7:13.
Yep, you good.
So we're going to jump right into the presentations because Ms. Gillespie needs to leave at 7:30. So we're going to start with CPC. So, quick background. CPC was passed in Southborough in 2003 or so. Southborough voted for a 1% surtax instead of could have done 2 to 3, but we did 1, right? This year's estimated receipts for fiscal year 20 is about $412,000 from the town. The state has a match on that, but that match continues to go down, so I think it's about 12% right now or so. So total receipts are expected to be for fiscal year 20, what, Ms. Gillespie?
We're estimating at 15%. It's been higher than that because we always get a little extra boost. It's just an estimate.
So if you look at the first warrant article, you'll see the estimate they've got in there. It is $415,000 in total, which includes the state money. So that's the new
400
money.
and, how much?
I got 415,968.
Okay.
You agree?
Yeah, I had printed out one from before. We had a little bit of a decrease from town treasurer, so
Okay.
that's what it says in the warrant, that's what it is.
What it says in the warrant I have. Does everybody see the same thing?
Okay.
415,968. Okay, so
All right, so having said that, I'm going to give you some paperwork, but it's based on that old number, so our total receipts are 420,000, so I'll resend the correct dollar amount.
projected receipts.
Yeah, projected. So, sorry, I have all these. I had forwarded you from our town, accountant. This gives you the account balances, so.
How many accounts do you have?
What number of warrant is this?
This is
Warrant article?
Kind of six.
19 through 24, I think.
What page is it?
So,
Judy said 40.
Page 40?
Yeah, so her articles are 19 through 24,
so,
starting on page 40.
just to be clear, I'm only going over the budget with you and none of the projects because we're doing the projects next Monday in front of the selectmen where the project proponents will be here to go over what's in the actual project. And I'm not sure exactly what you were looking for, so I have prepared a lot. The CPA, every year, we have to estimate the budget, and it's based on the anticipated surcharge that the town treasurer gives us. And then the state match is based on the prior year's receipts, because it's matching that year's, and we do our best guesstimate of what we think the state will be providing based on information we get from the Community Preservation Coalition. However, with the earlier town meeting, we didn't have great benefit of that. So we came up with an estimate of 15%, and then that creates our total surcharge amount, of which 10% has to go into each of the dedicated uses of CPA: historic preservation, open space, and community housing. Recreation is a use of CPA funds, but they don't get their own bucket. They were added on after the fact, so they have to come out of what's called the general unreserved fund.
So that's 30%. What else do you have to do?
The rest goes into the general unreserved fund, and we can use it on any of the projects and additionally recreation.
Don't you also have to put 5% in admin?
We don't, we do put 5% in admin.
You don't have to.
Yeah, but we do. And, sorry, I forgot that. So, if you, I'm sorry, I'm gonna give you this one, Thought I was so organized, and of course, I never am when it comes down to it. All right. So, and I apologize for the wrong dog and all. So this one here is at 420, right? That's the budget we come up with. So that's the first one. Then, you had the town accountant's balances in our bucket, we call them buckets in the accounts. Her work included past years of money coming in and out, but what we're concerned with is the bottom number. So what we do is, this here would be somewhat interesting, and this is the one I want to run through with you. Well, you know, I tell you, I printed them out and it came off by 11 by 17, and I didn't want to print them, so I cut them down. Some got better cut downs than others, so didn't want to waste a tree. All right, so if you look at this, I have the 4 or 5 funded projects after the budget in the warrant article, right? So you have the Burnett House. That's a bond we're paying off. It was supposed to be something like 170,000 or I forget what, but we got a some sort of interest match that the town treasurer had to apply towards it. What was that, Brian? So you're familiar, we got the premium, it went towards it, so we only had to pay $50,000 this year. The Halloran property, and I'll explain that later if you have questions, we bonded that last year at $175,000, and we have short-term interest of about $3,404, altogether $178,404. Based on changing conditions, we decided to pay the whole bond off this year. And I'll explain why. So that we're paying off and we won't have a bond on it. And then the library, we're projecting a bond on $1,040,000, but we won't pay anything this year, but that's an obligation. The Historic Society, or Society as I wrote, has a project for $50,000. So if you look across, at the top I wrote, these are the 3 funds we're taking from for this year's projects. So the Historic Fund, we took out the Burnett House bond. For the Halloran property, we took out everything that was in the Open Space Fund, and the remainder comes out of the general unreserved. So I'm backtracking a bit, but you can see that. So the Historic Society, we took it all out of the general unreserved. Invasive removal is an open space project, but we zeroed out open space, so we take it out of the general unreserved. Underneath that, you can see where I have the reservation balances for historic open space and housing. You can see now this is making assumptions that everything passes at town meeting, and you can see what after town meeting, the future balance in those accounts will be after the town accountant closes the books in fiscal year 20. So again, we've zeroed out open space. And then if you go down below that, so we have 3, and this is where you have to understand, you have 3 unreserved fund balances. So we have one that's in there now. Last town meeting, we put anything that we don't put into the buckets or spend, it goes into a budgeted reserve account. That allows us, if anything happens between annual town meeting and the next annual town meeting and we want to use that money, you can't unless you have voted it at town meeting. So it's sort of a holding place. It just stays there in case you need it, and then the first of the next fiscal year it drops into the general unreserved. So at town meeting, it's getting confusing, we have 2 accounts that on July 1st will merge into one, but then we also set up the third account, which will go into play on July 1st, but we could spend out of it now if we so desired.
Okay, so to summarize what you just said,
Yeah,
the only ongoing commitments that you've got going into this year are the Burnett House and the Halloran property,
correct.
right? Halloran you're going to pay off in fiscal year '20 completely, so
Yep.
it's going to be gone.
Yep.
And you'll continue to do the debt service on the Burnett House,
Correct.
right? Okay, then you've got 3 new projects that you're going to present to the town to be approved, which the biggest one by far is the library facade.
Correct.
Okay. So I got that, but I'm still confused with the numbers. As far as
Okay.
where you'll stand, so, let's just take them one at a time. So, housing, because that one seems to have the most money in as far as the dedicated ones, right? So you're gonna add the $42,000 to that one, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so you've got 313, you're predicting you're gonna have 313 at the end of fiscal year '20 in that account, because you're not gonna spend anything out of that account,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
That's correct, okay. Open space, you don't have anything going into it. It's 0 starting, you spend it all, basically. You're gonna add 42 to it, and you're gonna spend the 42, so that's gonna have a 0 balance at the end of fiscal year '20.
Right, that never built up because from the first vote of town meeting, when we had CPA passed, we voted on the Chestnut Hill Farm Bond. And we don't have to, you could not spend out of one of those buckets if you wanted to, say, build up a balance. But the committee has historically voted to spend out of the reserve buckets on any of the uses. So anytime there's an open space article, we spend out of there, and we had for the first 11 years, we had the Chestnut Hill Farm Bond, and since then, we keep spending out of there for smaller projects.
Okay, then historic, it looks like you think you're gonna have about $42,000 left in that at the end of fiscal year '20. And you're going to apply, so the 3 projects that are gonna be approved, you're gonna do you're applying the historic one against that in total. So that one's taken care of completely, nothing left over. Right, so you end up with almost 42,000 in that account at the end of fiscal year '20. Okay. What I don't understand is, going back to the library, the big one, where you're gonna bond it. So why aren't you showing anything for fiscal year '20 for that one?
Because until it's bonded, there is nothing to show.
Okay.
So typically, at next annual town meeting, we get a bill from the treasurer who will give us short-term, usually it's a short-term bond, and then sometimes it will be short-term plus the first installment for the following year. So we basically pay that for the first year, sort of after the fact. But we do have a bond schedule, so we do know what we anticipate that bond would cost.
Okay, so now let's go to the unreserved account, right?
Okay.
So that's where I'm confused. So can you explain the numbers there?
So certainly. If you saw from the town treasurer, that one I cut up, she had the reservation balances, right? So unreserved fund balance was $340,852.
Okay, so that's what we think is gonna be at 7/1/19 when we start the year, right? So that's what we think the balance will be at 7/1/19 when we start this coming fiscal year. That's your starting point,
So that's the starting point right now.
right? Which is, so 7/1/19. And then, okay, so the 208 is coming up from the top right-hand
I'm
corner.
sorry, where are you saying 7/1/19? I don't know what you're saying.
You are expecting to start the new fiscal year, I think, with $340,000 in that account,
Yes,
okay?
right now.
Yep. Then you've got, you think you're gonna spend 208 based on the 3 new, well, no, Halloran's part of that. So the old project of Halloran, and then the 2 new ones, historic and the invasive
In the
removal.
Burnett House.
Yep. Well, I
Yep.
don't think Burnett's coming out of that one. Burnett's coming out of historic,
Okay, sorry, yes.
right?
Yeah,
Okay, so that's where the 208, so everybody sees that top right-hand corner, there's your 208. That gets spent, so you got 132 left. Okay, now take it from there.
so if you look back to the town accountant's spreadsheet, we have another fund which is called the budgeted reserve account. Now, we set that up last year. Anything that we didn't spend and went into the 10% goes into the budget and unreserved. So that is at $210,022, right? On July 1st, that amount, unless we could have chosen to spend out of it, but we didn't, that amount drops into the unreserved fund balance. So the two of those are joined together, right? So now you have the 132 and the 210, right?
Okay, which totals 342.
Did I make a mistake in my?
Not necessarily, I'm just trying to, so that would be 342, so the next one is fiscal year budget reserve of 273, so I don't know where that's coming from.
Okay,
So maybe that is a mistake?
yeah, let me see how I did this. I had 340, right? And then I subtracted the 208 for 132,
So it leaves you 132.
and I should have been adding,
You're okay so far, then you've got 210 to start with the
and
budget
then I
reserve.
had the 132. So I did that twice, maybe. Sorry.
Okay, so
I've been
it's-
sick, so I was whipping this off
It's okay
10
for you.
minutes
Let's just try to
before I
get-
came.
Okay, so you start with 210, you're gonna add the 132 to it, so that's 342 and change.
And then we add the 273 that's budgeted this year.
And I don't see where the 273 is coming from.
So if you go back to the budget, looks like this. And it's in the budget in the Warren article, right? It's what's left after we put the 10% and the 5% admin into those buckets.
Okay, so that's new money.
New money. It's in a separate account. So, I'm sorry, I don't even see what I did wrong here.
I think you're doing the 273 twice, and then I think you didn't add the 210 and 132, and the 132 and 210 together. So we'll get it straight. So you're gonna have, call it between 500 and 700 at the end of fiscal year 20, based on these numbers.
Yeah, 5, 6.
Okay, all right, so I'm just trying to get an
600.
idea of where here. Okay, so anybody have any further questions to kind of see where she is?
I'll fix this and I'll send it out to you. Sorry about that.
So you've got
so-
some money to do some things with, if they come up.
The CPC is, the Community Preservation Funds is not a savings account. However, we look at what might be coming down the road. Every year, we have an annual public forum. We invite everyone in the town to come and give us their ideas of their goals, their wishes, what they want to fund, and unfortunately, every year, we get very little input. So we try, our committee is made up of representatives of other boards and committees. We try to have an idea, is there something big coming down the road? Now, I'm there as a rep of the Open Space Preservation Commission, and what I can tell you is, I don't know what's going to be available, but if there's an open space project, it's going to be millions. Other towns do it differently. They set aside money for open space through the years and build up an account. You know, my committee has not chosen to do that, but we do not like to go down to zero unless there's something really important. And we also had a saying, you know, you keep a little bit there, maybe kind of for a rainy day if something important comes along. But, you know, we've had a couple of rainy days. The Burnett House was a big expenditure. The library's a big expenditure. So another thing we do is we look at our bonding capacity, and that's maybe for another meeting, but we can only bond against the surcharge, and you have to take out the 10%. So we can take 65% of our anticipated surcharge is available for bonding. And that was one reason why we decided we had money in the account to pay off the the Halloran property, but we wanted to allow us to have a better bonding capacity if another big project came up. So we thought it was better to pay that off, not have the interest, and that's why we changed from a year ago. We were bonding, and now we're paying it off. At that time, it made sense. We didn't have $1 million library project on the table at that time either. So that's how we try to respond and be responsible to long-term anticipation of what CPA projects could come forth.
Okay, who's got questions for Ms. Gillespie? We'll get you, oh, you gotta go.
And, sorry, I made it a little longer than necessary with those bad numbers.
Anybody, quick question for Claire?
So are you going to be coming back to explain, you said that you were going to pass out or send an update on the figures?
I'm just going to correct where I added and subtracted and double, just the
Oh,
second.
okay.
There.
There's
And
just one
then-
little portion.
So
You're gonna be there March 5th to hear the
Right,
presentation of
okay.
the actual projects.
all right,
that are proposed.
so just so that you know, and I understand buckets and all that kind of stuff, and I understand on this list for the articles that you have for current town meeting, okay? The part below that all gets a little fuzzy.
The
Maybe,
unreserved
and you don't
accounts.
have to, if there's a time commitment, you don't have to, but just so that,
What
I
I'm
mean,
saying,
maybe I'm stupid and somebody
No.
can explain it a little bit better, but,
let me say, I made a mistake in that exact section.
okay.
Just to make it simple, every year at town meeting, when we're doing our budget, just pretend it's all called like general unreserved, right? It's all money that can be used in any of the categories. There's 3 different buckets for that at town meeting,
Understood.
and they can be used on any project. And after town meeting, right between the time of town meeting and before she closes the books, there are 3 buckets because 1 is future and 2 are current.
And then just quickly, my other question, and I'm sorry, I don't have the article that I read about a cut in the match for this year because of a shortage of funds, and I will send it out to everybody. So if I understand this correctly, you haven't gotten what the direct match is going to be, or what the
never know.
finalized match is going to be?
You get the cash every November, October.
That was for last year.
For last year, yeah, but we don't know that.
Okay, so that article then would probably maybe affect then going forward.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
So what
Thank you.
happens is,
That was my question.
it's not until everybody's money, that takes money out of CPA is done, and they take what's in the account, and they divvy it up to all the towns, do you know what it's going to be? So if more towns, say, sign up, and there's more money going out and less money comes in, it's all based on a surcharge on your recording of deeds. Every year, this coalition advocates to get extra cash from the state, and every year they
So
give
be
us a
clear about
little.
what you said. The surcharge is funded by when people sell property, you gotta pay you pay a transfer tax in Massachusetts, where they add on a little bit of surcharge. That's how the state gets its money to do this. And I don't know why it's gone down so much, but it's gone way down over the last 10 years.
I can
compared
tell
to
you.
what it was. Go ahead.
So when it first started, there was only a few communities that had it. We were one of the first communities. We were always only guaranteed our fair share of the
So there's
bucket.
more there participates, so the pie has gotten much bigger as far as how they got divvy up, so we get less and less.
Pulling out of there's more people eating the pie. And the pie has shrunk in size because overall, in the heyday of a different housing market and people refinancing and that fund built up. And then for many years after, when not that many communities had adopted, there was, I won't call it excess, but there was more money in the account than was being drawn down. We were at 100% for a lot of years. And then it's gone down, and they are trying to shore it up so we get a guaranteed higher amount.
In the state surcharge, does it depend on whether the town has picked 1, 2, or 3, or it
Yes.
has nothing to do with it? It does?
Only in that, there's a first round, everyone gets a percentage of that, and then if you're at 3%, you get an extra little kick in, and we don't get that.
Okay, anybody have a quick question as she's walking out the door?
Sorry, just one question. So the library is $1 million in one of the articles, so you're gonna bond that So do you have a long-term schedule on how that will be funded?
Well, yes, I do. Town treasurer, I didn't know if you wanted to see this. Town treasurer gave me a schedule. We also have a big bond for the, so it was $970 for 84 Main Street, and we're assuming $1,040,000 for the library. So he combined the two numbers. I have it separate if you want to see each one, but, so on this spreadsheet, the first column is the two combined. And then, you'll, we'll do this another night, but, they're both historic, so we're assuming we're gonna take the historic, we're gonna take the historic bucket first. That schedule also anticipates our surcharge based on a 3.3% increase that town treasurer agreed, based on historical, how far up our surcharge goes every year. And then it shows the bond monies going down and our surcharge going up. So there's a point where you can see we will have a better ability to bond in the future. Although we do have some bonding capacity now, based on 65%, and then depending on which project it is, you can use the 10% if there's any money in that account.
Brad? Judy? Okay. So we'll see you on the 5th.
Does that answer your question? I hate giving those sheets out when I can't explain what all those numbers are, but
You do good.
I think that one's better than the one I made a mistake on. Thank you.
Okay, so next. Betsy? So why don't you introduce yourself?
Betsy Rosenblum, Chair of Personnel Board.
So I sent everybody what you sent to me as far as your article goes. I'm not sure if we've had time to digest it all, but can you just help us? I always think this is one of the toughest ones that we deal with at town meeting because, you know, we're not HR people and it gets detailed and gets complicated.
Either am I.
But you're better than we are. So can you just walk us through what you think is important about the article as far as it changes?
Sure. I'm just going to get my document out.
7.
The important thing is that we didn't change much this year. The Personnel Board had commissioned a study of the part-time salaries, that's Schedule C, Section 20, Schedule C, and that was completed and resulted in a new Schedule C. And that's all explained in the document I sent around. And we asked for an analysis of how that would affect the salaries, and the recommendation of the consultant was, I think, one employee would need a raise, and it's explained in the comments, of 20 cents an hour. So it wouldn't be a hardship to any department. So it showed that our salary ranges for part-time employees, even though we hadn't updated them in some time. Somehow, I was told by Ms. Hale, the Assistant Town Administrator who serves as staff liaison to the board, that the part-time salaries had not been studied during her tenure, and that was some 17 or 18 years. But when we had a consultant look at it, what she came back with didn't represent a huge jump for the town. The minimum was $11 an hour, and the maximum, hang on, I want to make sure I get these right, hang on. The new minimum hourly, and this is page 5 of your handout, under delete the existing Schedule C and insert a new one. So the consultant recommended that we consolidate the current schedule is grades 1 through 13. She recommended that we consolidate them as 1 through 5. Just meant putting different positions into the same band. The new minimum hourly rate recommended by the consultant is $11 an hour, and I'm told that's what we pay our lowest paid employees are currently making. The library pages make $11.07 an hour. And the new maximum hourly rate, if the town votes to adopt the new Schedule C proposed by the consultant that we've approved, is $42 an hour, and that's $1 more than we're currently paying. Our top number is 41. So not a big change. And Ms. Hale got together with Mr. Ballantyne, and they did a financial analysis for the benefit of the Personnel Board, and it showed that if town meeting does adopt the new schedule, one part-time police dispatcher will be entitled to a raise. I'm sorry, it wasn't 20 cents, it's 38 cents an hour. So, and I'm told, we asked Ms. Hale to meet with all affected departments. She did, reported back to us that that would not be a problem for the police department. There was one other employee in Youth and Family Services who would have been affected and would have needed to have a raise, but that was handled separately through a recommendation, through a request with the Board of Selectmen, and if that goes through, that employee will be transferred to Schedule A, to full-time. So
So
that was a change.
The Personnel Board warrant article for the last few town meetings has been somewhat controversial. There's been a lot of discussion. We've done some studies to try to get things where we think they are as far as market goes. So it sounds like you think we're there at this point, that the SAP is in good shape. We've got market salaries. We don't think we have to adjust. You know, there was a time when we thought we had to make some big adjustments to certain people. So we think that that's all been worked out, and that the SAP right now is solid as far as the whole thing from beginning to end.
I wouldn't go that far. What I would say is we had Schedule C on the table that was commissioned in 2017. Most of the people who are on the board now, majority of the people on the board weren't even around when that started, so that process finished. It was delayed for reasons I won't go into. It tells us that our salaries are okay. We haven't studied Schedule A since I think that was 2015. This all predates my tenure on the board. So under the SAP, we do what's called a quadrennial review. Every 4 years, or every election cycle, at least every 4 years, we're supposed to study the salary schedules. We're due to do that again for the full-time. So that's in our budget for FY20. So I'd like to say, yeah, it's all sewn up, but it goes on and on. The other thing that is of a concern to the Personnel Board, and this was brought to our attention by one of our members, Jay Dietz, because he heard about it from attorneys at his private employer, the Massachusetts Equal Protection Act. And again, I am an attorney, but I don't practice in this area. I, in fact, don't practice anymore. But Massachusetts Equal Pay Act, my understanding is there's always been one, but there were major revisions to the act. It got beefed up, and that was effective July 1st, 2018. Mr. Dietz reported to us on the board about this, and we requested a legal opinion from town council. It was my feeling that if we are going to do our quadrennial review, it ought to be done with a mind toward what the requirements of this, I'll call it the new MEPA, even though it has existed, the new MEPA that came in 2018. And we had not received any guidance from the town. So we received last month, I think it was, we discussed it at our January 30th meeting. Mr. Purple gave us an opinion from Special Town Labor Council about MEPA, and it's about 6 pages long. I don't know if you all have seen it. I don't know if those things get disseminated. It came to the Personnel Board. So the buzzword for 2019 is equal pay. So I think we need, it's my opinion, and the board hasn't voted on this, but we've discussed it. Any salary, any review that we do of Schedule A needs to be done with equal pay in mind, because it's a factor. So And I'm sure Mr. Purple could share that opinion with you. It's about 6 pages long. Board hasn't had a chance to digest it yet because we were doing SAP, and it's on our agenda for our next meeting, March 13th. So we certainly need to the town needs to incorporate equal pay thinking in any sort of salary survey that it does. And I want to be careful. I have no reason to think that we have any problems in this area, but the law says we need to look into it and make sure that we don't. So
I'm just kind of trying to set the framework for everybody else, and then everybody can ask individual questions. So I think there's 66 people on the SAP right now, if I counted correctly from the spreadsheet. So how does the raise for that particular person come about? So what's the process for someone to basically have their salary set for the next year?
So when I joined the board was still reviewing individual performance evaluations at each meeting. And I think before I even came on the board, I questioned it because I did some reading, and employee performance evaluations are not considered protected under the open meeting law, unless you're going to talk about certain aspects, and I don't have those in front of me. I think mental health is one of them. But if you're going to talk about someone's performance and their professional competence, it's not considered a ground for an executive session. On the other hand, in Massachusetts, performance evaluations are considered protected under the public records law. So it seemed to me, even before I started sitting on personnel board, after I was appointed, that's an awkward intersection of the open meeting law and the public records law. So what can you do with it? And that's in part because we discuss them as a board. I guess in other towns, I've been told they don't do that. So what it devolved into, and I observed this before I even got on the board, I sat in on a few meetings in the summer a couple years ago before I got on the board. Department head would come in, or board or commission, whoever did the evaluation, and they'd sit there, and the personnel board would thank them for doing a great job, and it became a review of the performance evaluation itself, rather than saying anything. You know, they'd say something, oh, what a wonderful employee, but we never discussed the negative because nobody wanted to talk about it in an open meeting. So I became chair of the board in July, and the first thing I did was request that the board move those to a consent agenda because they were taking up 9/10 of our time, and we weren't really doing anything with them. And the second thing that I did was, so the board has a custom of voting an annual adjustment for salary increases. I don't know if you're all familiar with that.
We're not, so help us.
Oh, okay. Well, again, this is something else I inherited. As chair, I'm looking into changing this. There wasn't enough time to get this all done before this year. So there are 2 sections of the SAP that I think are relevant. One is 7A, and that says that anybody in employment for the town is entitled to an annual review, performance evaluation. And then there's a section that says people can get raises. Doesn't say anything about us passing an annual adjustment, and I think that's 16A, I know, somewhere in section 16. I think what happened so when I got on the board, I'm told it was a long-standing practice of the board to vote an annual adjustment. And in fact, I remember this when I was a library trustee a decade ago. At that time, we had union employees at the library. We also had SAP employees, the manager, I think the children's librarian, and the director of the library. And the part-time employees were SAP, and then the full-time librarians were, so we had a mixture. And I wasn't the person who went up to personnel board, but I remember people would come back. Maybe it was Judy, maybe Judy was one of those people that came back at the time. And we were told, oh, the personnel board said the raises for this year are 2% or 2.5%, whatever it was. And I said, I don't understand. Why is that the case? These are not union employees. Why is some board called personnel board telling us what the raise should be? I thought the trustees evaluate the director and should set the raise. And we were told, no, the personnel board sets this number, and that's the number. So when I became chair, I looked into this, and there isn't actually anything in the SAP that says we're supposed to do this. and I'd like to change it because it's not in the SAP, and maybe go back to a different system. I don't know what that would be. I haven't had a chance to discuss this with the board. So we did go ahead and vote an annual adjustment this year because I was told by administrators that it was necessary guidance to the departments as to what raises should be. So we pass a number, and that number is 2.5%, or last year was 2.25%, this year it's 2.5%. And it's supposed to be understood as a maximum, not that every employee, regardless of performance, gets a 2.5% raise. In my time on the board, I've now gone through 2 cycles of employee evaluations. I can think of one where the department or board or commission, sometimes it's a joint, sometimes you have a department head who does an evaluation, sometimes you have a related board or commission, sometimes they participate, sometimes it's done by Mr. Purple for departments under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. I think I've seen one where a performance review was for less than the maximum amount. So pretty much whatever you set it at, that's what people are going to ask for. I think we should go back to the SAP, and I think we should get rid of that. What the SAP says we're supposed to do is look at the schedules and vote appropriate adjustments to the schedules based on market and based on external things. And I can find that provision of the SAP if you want me to. It doesn't say anything about passing an annual adjustment. But we did it for this year because I was told that's what needs to be done, and we didn't really have time to study the issue and come up with anything else. And I didn't want to suddenly yank the rug out from under a whole town that was waiting for that pronouncement. So it's 2.5%. But I'd like to look at that, especially since these are not union employees. So I don't really know why we have a system. For as long as I've been on the board, and even before, we've kind of struggled with that.
Chelsea? I just wondered, I can't remember what the minimum wage is now.
So there's a state minimum wage and a federal minimum wage, and this was an issue at town meeting in 2017. The federal minimum wage sits at 7.25. The state minimum wage is currently at 12 and continues to rise. And again, I'm not sure when it stops. It's going to stop at, well, for now, it's scheduled to stop at $15 an hour, but not till maybe 2022 or 23. So we've talked about this. Currently, we have employees making $11 an hour. Do we want that to go? So municipalities are not subject to the state minimum wage. When the legislature raises the minimum wage, towns and cities are exempt. And I asked Mr. Purple to inquire of Labor Council or Town Council whether or not that continues to be the case under the new law. It was the case under the old law. Then when they raised it, so this law we have in place now, where it will go to $15 an hour. And I am told that council said municipalities do continue to be exempt. So there are those who think we should rise with the state minimum wage. I've said this in the meetings, we haven't voted on it. It would be my opinion, and I can't speak for the board, that if we were to make the decision to go to the state minimum wage, even though that might, on the books, be a call for personnel board, I think that's a bigger decision, and I would like to bring in other people. I'd like to hear from the Board of Selectmen. I would think it would be appropriate to talk to all of you. I mean, that's a commitment to the town, because it may go beyond 15. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, it's going to stay at 15 for a while. That's a commitment. I think maybe we should talk to the taxpayers before we decide to go. Our commitment right now is 7. Legally, we're obligated to pay 7.25. I'm told by payroll that we don't pay anyone less than 11. But before we would decide to go to 15, I'd like to hear other voices other than the 5 people who sit on personnel board. It seems to me that would be appropriate. That's my personal opinion. We haven't discussed it.
Who gets the 7.25? Was that the library pages?
No, nobody. 7.25 is the federal minimum wage. I'm sorry if I was confusing. 7.25 is the federal minimum wage. That's what the town is obligated to pay. I'm told that nobody gets less than $11 an hour.
And that tends to be like the library pages.
Library pages, yes.
Do you know?
Hang on. So, what? Yeah, we have some poll workers and election wardens who are very very part-time employees. Jim was just before us, the clerk, for a raise for those employees. I think wardens were, hang on, I've got a list right here. So this is, I requested from payroll from Brian, and Kristen supplied me with a details sheet. But this is a couple months old. I've discussed with Brian and Kristen, they're working on a new one for me, but they've been kind of busy. We have library pages at 1107. We might have some seasonal I think this applies mostly to the seasonal recreation workers. And I'm sorry, I don't remember, Jim we just voted a raise. I can get you that information after the meeting.
Curious.
For the election workers and wardens. Wardens might be up to like 12 and a quarter, rings a bell, something like that. I don't see them on this list because they're such a special category. They don't always. I'm just looking. Yeah, largely library pages at 1107. So, and I did, the list that I got from payroll, I did pass on to Ms. Cook, so that's available to you. And we have a request for an updated list on order, and I've asked Kristen to send that to you the same time that she sends it to me.
How do you come up with the 2.5%?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. I asked the same question when I came on the board, and it was kind of like, so my first year, I joined the board in September or August 30th of 2017, and we then were setting it in 2017. So it was like I had been on the board maybe a month or two, and Ms. Hale brought a list to the personnel board of towns. It was just like a spreadsheet of various towns and what they do. So external comps, I guess, is the best word for it. External comps, and averaged them, and we voted, and it came out at 2.25. So this year I started to think about whether or not I thought that was the most, if there were other factors that should be considered. So I sat down with Vanessa, and I asked her if she applied any sorts of, when the towns that we were looking at, it seemed like a broad range, and she said basically no, it was just a list serve. So it didn't have anything to do with towns that were like our town. And the first thing that I noticed was, when I kind of dove into a little deeper this year, different towns do it different ways. Some have merit programs. So her list, actually, the list that I saw in draft this year had towns, and then one column was merit, and then one column was, I don't want to call it a COLA because it's not a COLA, but more that sort of thing. And what jumped out at me is that's kind of apples and oranges because we don't have a merit program here. So if you're just going to look at one of those columns, it could be misleading. In other words, a town may choose to give everybody a base, we'll call it a COLA, although we don't call it a COLA in Southborough because it's not a COLA, of 1 to 2%, and then they have a merit program on top of it. So we don't have a merit program. So if you just add up all the figures for the 1 and 2% for the COLA-like, it's going to be misleading because those employees could be getting up to 7%. So I thought there were some issues with it. I remember we brought Brian into it, and we said maybe there's a little better way to do this. So we did look at the external data. The other thing was I think it was a former member of this board, Ms. Mugridge, who first suggested to me that maybe we should look at internal considerations as well. Maybe all these other towns aren't putting up expensive new public safety buildings and other things, and that we ought to consider the internal condition of the town. So this year, I don't know what past boards have done. My first year on the board, 2017, we didn't. This year, in the fall of 2018, we considered that as well. And then we turned to our finance director and asked him to come in on it, and he was helpful in supplying more information to us. So we actually ended up in a situation where we passed at 2.5%. I think we also looked at what contract employees were making this year. And we didn't receive that data in any official way, and I'd kind of like to change how that works. I think SAP employees do not exist in a vacuum. They exist as part of a talent pool that includes managers who, do you know about contracted employees?
Why don't you
Yeah, so this is, I'm just kind of learning. I think it may have been a feeling somewhere, and I don't want to characterize what past boards thought or looked at, because I wasn't there. I don't know what they thought or looked at, and every time the board changes, they may have a different approach. There was a feeling when I came on the board that we just look at the SAP and for my first year and not really beyond that. And in some cases, we do hear about what's happening with unions, but very tangentially. Mr. Purple comes to our meetings and lets us know a little bit about what's going on with unions, but we don't really have anything to do with that. But we do have some employees in town who are entitled to contracts, and that's by state statute. Chapter 41, Section 108N, and Section 108N and 1/2. And my reading of the statute, again, I don't practice in the area, I am an attorney, is that it is not the election of the employee. It would be for your CEO to decide, or your appointing authority, so in this case, the Board of Selectmen. So I've heard it said both ways, that there are employees who are entitled to contracts and that there are employees who can elect contracts. My current reading of it, I don't know if Mark has a different reading, is it's the election of the Board of Selectmen. There is not an employee in town who can say, hey, give me a contract, if the Board of Selectmen don't want to. So currently, contract employees include the town administrator, the finance director, even though the statute doesn't call him a finance director. It does for people holding these positions in doing this job, even if it has a different title, and he's finance director, treasurer, collector. So you have a contract technically as treasurer, collector. Town accountants can have contracts, and I believe Ms. Krieger has a contract. The principal assessor, Mr. Sibeli, is entitled, may have a contract. And am I missing anybody? Yeah, but not under those statutes. That's a separate statute. Oh, Ms. Galligan, but that's under, library directors are not under Chapter 41, 108, or N and a half. The Superintendent of Public Works has a contract, but that's under a different statute. That's under the Special Act establishing. I can get you all this stuff if you want. Bring everything tonight, because actually, I may have some of these statutes, Judy, just for Judy. Judy thought she was done looking at statutes of me.
That's okay.
All right. Yeah, here you go. I've got copies of the statute. So Ms. Galligan, the Superintendent of Public Works, has a contract under a separate statute, which is actually the act that established the Department of Public Works in Southborough in 1991. And I don't have that citation, but I will get it for you, Dr. Butts. So we have employees with contracts, we have union employees, and we have SAP employees.
Is that it, Chelsea?
No, can I keep going?
And I've forgotten if there was a question attached to that.
You
Oh,
answered
so
my
this
first
year
question.
we sat down, and because just briefly, because the municipal calendar had been moved up, we were asked to set the annual adjustment pretty early. I think the budget calendar had departments handing in budgets in September, early October. So we voted 2.5% based on the external things and a discussion of internal matters. And then subsequently, so when I got on the board, the practice was to vote this annual adjustment and then sometimes not do anything with the salary tables. So last year, which was my first year presenting at town meeting, 2018, I was in the position of being told that I needed to ask for a 6% increase in the Schedule A salaries. That's Section 20 of the SAP. Schedule A is full-time salaries. Because we had been giving this annual adjustment, employees have been getting 2 or 2.5%, but we didn't change the tables. So people were losing ground relative to the table. So I went before town meeting and asked for a 6% increase. So the salaries in Schedule A all went up by 6%. Nobody got a 6% raise, but it was, for 3 years, they hadn't asked town meeting to vote an increase in those tables. So me being a mathematical genius, said, well, wait a minute, maybe every year when we do this annual adjustment thing, we should also do a corresponding increase in the table so nobody loses ground. If everybody's going to get a 2% increase, why don't we just increase the table 2% every year? And I was told by some folks that that made sense, because I never know if anything will make sense. So I have people I ask, they said that makes sense, otherwise you're gonna end up where you did last year, or a few years from now, having to ask for an increase. So I brought it up at a meeting, and the town accountant had a problem with it. So I asked her if and she's an important person, so I asked her to get together with Brian and Mark and everybody else who thinks about these things and come back. So we actually ended up doing a different adjustment to the table than the 2.5%. We reconsidered how we did it, and I'm sorry this gets very confusing, but Brian came up with an analysis of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. A 3-year average is 1.65. So if you look at the document that explains what we're recommending to do with town meeting this year for the schedules, it's to raise the schedules 1.65%. So that's why the annual adjustment and the adjustment to the salary schedule doesn't match this year, because it was part of a learning process, I guess is the best way to put it. And we will continue to evolve.
So the 2.5% that you're approving for, or recommending for this year, that doesn't mean every employee will get it, but that's what the departments have decided will happen?
Because, thank you for the question, because it's not in the SAP, it doesn't go to town meeting. It's just a custom thing that's been happening that we're still doing. And yet the understanding is that employees are entitled to up to 2.5% if they have a satisfactory review. The fact that every review we get asks for the max. I can think of one out of maybe the 50 that I've seen where a department said this employee should get a little less.
So it's
And
within,
what was happening when I first got on the board, and again, I'm sorry this is so confusing, it's really been a learning curve for me. When I came on the board, department heads and boards and committees would come and ask for more than the annual adjustment. And I think every meeting since my first meeting, September 13th, 2017, the board would wrestle with someone coming in and saying, well, I know you voted an annual adjustment of 2%, but Mrs. Smith is just the greatest employee. She developed this thing called sliced bread, and she deserves 3.5%. And sometimes the board would give them, and I was on the board. And I raised my hand and I said, I'm really confused. How can we, and this went on for some time. So when I became chair, I recommended to the board that we pass a policy that until we sort out merit pay and sort out all these other things, that we stop giving people the opportunity to come in and ask for more than the standard, because it just didn't seem appropriate. And the board did pass that policy. So now we do performance evaluations by consent agenda, because nobody really knows what we're supposed to say out loud about them anyway. So now we've removed the need to talk about them, and nobody comes before us for more than the standard.
okay.
So,
And my last question is, can you explain your board's position on the Schedule E for the energy management stipend?
sure. So that started with the memo from Mr. Purple. Did you all see that memo?
Yes, I did.
I made copies. I don't know if you've seen it. January 22nd.
Sounds like some of us have, some of us haven't, so.
Okay, with your permission? You have a copy.
I think I do. Thank you.
Just because this is where we started, so I'll start where we started. This was in our packet for our January 30th.
This is the stipend question.
Yeah.
I asked her outside about that,
You
too.
asked me.
Outside, so it's good.
I think I saw this.
So like most, all of the things that we do, this came to us on a request from a department. In this case, from the town administrator, who's also the personnel director, and the Board of Selectmen. And I can't remember if the memo that you have predates the board's approval of it. But the board, we were advised that the Board of Selectmen had approved it, not unanimously, but a majority of the Board of Selectmen. So this raises another interesting question I've been asking since I came on Personnel Board. What is the standard of review when a proponent comes before the Personnel Board? And I don't know that anybody knows that question, same as for your board. Is it a de novo review? Do you start at the beginning? Do we go back and, take testimony from the employee about what they've been doing? No, that's not how we do it. We listen to the supervisor, and we do give deference to the board that has studied it. And I do know, because I was at the Board of Selectmen meetings, that the Board of Selectmen did give it a thorough hearing. I think it was was it over 2 meetings, Mark? I think it was 2 meetings. Yeah, and Mr. Purple did relate that to us. So we had his memo, we had the effort of the Board of Selectmen to sort it out over 2 meetings. There was concern, it was not unanimous. There was concern, and one of our members did not vote in favor of it. We did get a letter and some testimony from a town resident, Ms. Foster, and she did write us a letter, and that was in our packet. I can't remember if it was January 30th or February 6th. We had back-to-back meetings to finish up the SAP. And she was concerned. She was, at that time, still an employee of the DPW, but she said she was leaving her employment shortly. So she was appearing mostly as a taxpayer, and she felt that it was very unfair, set a bad precedent, and said that ever since we adopted this new compensation plan that was adopted in 2015, the current classification and compensation plan, that people got, I think she called them special favors. And one of our board members was concerned about the precedent that it was setting and didn't vote in favor of it. So the vote was 3-1. We have one member who currently is in a limbo status. Mr. Milholland is not in state. He doesn't come to the meetings, and he's pretty much announced that he will step down when a new member of the Personnel Board can be appointed by the moderator. So we're pretty much 4 people at this point. So it was 3-1. Personally, the biggest factor for me was I heard that the employee was told 2 years ago that if they undertook this responsibility, they would be compensated for it. And even though it's a prospective, I felt that something needed to be done now, whether it was the best way to do it or not, because the employee had been told that they would be compensated for this work. And that they had done a significant amount of work. It's laid out in the memo. We relied on the memo that we had been qualified as a green community. And in fact, we have the state, I don't know if you've seen it, the state has, I have no reason to question what's represented in the town administrator's memo, but I did look, if you look at, the state has published a list of the green communities and the grants, so you can see it in black and white and green and yellow. There's a little detail on the grants that's not in Mr. Purple's memo. February 1st, 2017, grant award of $142,865, and it lists what it's for. July of 2018, $250,000. So, as represented in Mr. Purple's memo, was that 290,000 or over 290,000?
Thank you.
So,
Judy, you do? So just to be clear, as far as the stipend, who is the employee that is going to do the work?
the employee, we were told, Personnel Board was told that these duties are currently assigned to John Parent of the Facilities Department. I meet with Mr. Purple and sometimes Ms. Hale prior to meetings. So in case you don't know, under the town administrator bylaw, the town administrator is the personnel director. He has concurrent authority over personnel with the personnel board. I think the language of the TA statute says he works at our direction. We can argue about whether or not that actually happens, but we do our best to communicate and coordinate on matters of mutual concern. So I had sat down with Mark some time ago, and he had told me that they thought the appropriate way to approach this was through a stipend because the duties might be transferred to another employee. So rather than putting it into a job description for a particular employee, this is really a job unto itself that currently is assigned to Mr. Parent and Facilities, but as the program evolves, could be transferred to somebody else, maybe in Facilities, maybe in another department. So it was thought that a stipend was the way to go. It's almost
Mr.
like
Parent's going to earn $6,000 more than he would have otherwise for the fiscal year ending 20.
Yes.
It's in his budget, it's facilities budget, so if the budget as Board of Selectmen and Advisory have voted on, the operation budget passes, nobody holds that and changes that, that is part of the budget for fiscal year 20. But it's not automatically going to be in fiscal year 21, it's a one-year stipend. So his salary hasn't been increased by $6,000 permanently. He's going to get a $6,000 one-time set of payments over fiscal year 20, and then we'll think about it again for next year.
What we were told a couple of things relevant to that. Thank you for your comment. One was Mr. Parent and Mr. Purple, when they were before Personnel Board, acknowledged that these stipends are not permanent. So to your point, yes, it's in there now. It can always be taken out. It could be that the duties are transferred to someone else. It could be that the program morphs and the stipend is increased, decreased, removed completely. So yes. The other thing is we were told that the stipend would be paid out of the grant monies. So I know this is an argument people could argue either way. Oh, well, you would have gotten $300,000 in grant money, but now you're going to get $294,000 in grant money. Well, I would argue if the person wasn't doing the job and getting the grant money, we wouldn't be getting any grant money. So yes, you're going to get $6,000 less in grant money, but it was represented to our board, and I think this was significant for at least some of the members, that it wouldn't be a net cost to the town. It would be paid. I don't know if you've ever done any of these grants. The cost of the staff can be an administrative cost of the grant, and my understanding is that's the case, and that the stipend will be paid out of grant money.
If we get it. If we get it.
Well, they have a demonstrated record of bringing in,
Okay.
I can't add very well, sorry, it's 290, is that, Brian, can you add these numbers? Roughly 143,000 to 250,000. That's correct. Okay. And do we have a reason to think that's it, that's the end of it? The grant program continues, right? Correct. Sure. Okay. It's competitive every year. Okay, okay.
All right, Brad.
Yeah, nobody ever said there's a guarantee that you absolutely are gonna get that type of money.
Totally unrelated question. So your committee looks at salaries, adjustments, and that kind of stuff. Do you look at pensions at all, or is that beyond your purview?
Great question. Thank you for asking. Another question I've asked. Pensions are not in the SAP. SAP does have a section on benefits, but it's sick time, holidays. We do not have post-employment benefits as part of the SAP. Some of us have begun to argue that that is something that we should look at because that's a total cost of an employee's package. So say, for example, we have a request to bring a new position into the SAP. I think fire chief was one that came in, and then it didn't, deputy fire chief. And I asked what would be the total cost of the position. I don't know that we ever got that, and I think a decision was made to table that for a while until we get a new fire chief. But it's something that is now part of the discussion that we have. And I discovered, quite by accident, I think it was Ms. Hale brought it to my attention that the Board of Selectmen had passed a benefits policy November 3rd, 2016, regarding post-employment benefits for new part-time positions. It was a cost containment measure. I don't know that anybody on Personnel Board even knew about it. So we had a discussion about that, because it is relevant. It is relevant, but it is not in the SAP, but it is part of the total package. So currently, we have nothing to say about it, but we are taking cognizance of it. I'm sorry, it's not a great answer, but it's a big post-employment benefits. I think, actually, Brian, you did a memo for us. Brian's been very helpful. He's been great. Like I said, he and Kristen help us bridge the gap between the decisions that we make at our meetings and the real world consequences of them. And the board does want to know about the costs. And I think, Brian, you've done a couple of tables for us showing us the cost of post-employment benefits.
So, I have a few questions. The 2.5%, seems to me that that's kind of pretty much automatic, that employees get that. If you only had 1 out of 50 who did not get 2.5%, it seems pretty much.
We have a lot of great employees in town.
I'm sure we do, absolutely.
We
Because I
say
came
that
from-
it's not a COLA in the sense that you have to have a production of a satisfactory performance
Right.
evaluation, but it is COLA-like in that sense.
Yeah. And I don't know anything about personnel, but it just really seems to me, coming from the corporate environment, it seems that it really takes away not to have any kind of a merit-based, and this isn't anything we're going to decide tonight, but it just seems that not having any kind of a merit-based amount is something that someday when you guys don't have anything to do, you can look at. Speaking of, for those of you who were at town meeting a couple years ago, was that 2 years ago maybe?
2017.
When there was a change in the SAP, and Betsy stood up and said, how can we vote on this because we don't know what the changes are? And
Well, actually, it started before me. I just sort of jumped on.
Oh, okay.
There were a few other people who spoke before me, but yeah, I was part of a group of
Okay,
people who
so
spoke.
I think the way that you have presented it, with the way it's been sent out now, makes it really pretty clear. And I think this year at town meeting, it's going to be a whole lot easier to vote on the changes because people obviously see the changes. Betsy has put a tremendous amount of work into this. I mean, like, unbelievable in terms of sorting this out. Okay, we pat her on the back enough, but.
We had a handout in 2018 as well. There was no SAP passed in 2017. That was the annus horribilis for
Okay,
the SAP.
Well, I'm just looking.
We had handouts last year, and it went through smoothly. But again, every town
I have a
meeting
short
is a
memory.
different town meeting, so, yeah. So we had a handout. We had a one-page handout, and I think last year was 10-page. This year it's a 6-page.
And I would just ask, because of the amount of work that has to get done by the personnel board, that as soon as a qualified person comes up for this position, I'm sure you can use this person on your committee, because there's a lot of
Absolutely.
things
Absolutely.
that, you've done. Okay.
It's not just, we have a great team, too. We have a wonderful board.
Absolutely, and I've
wonderful
attended some
board.
of your meetings, and this is how I
Thank you.
kind of got to learn about all of this stuff. So the other question that I have is the setup that we have in the town with a personnel director and a personnel board, and the way this is set up, is this consistent with other towns? Does anybody know? Okay. And not to get into a big thing about it, but I'm just curious since we have everybody here.
I think it varies from town to town. It depends on whether you have a charter or not, which kind of unifies the personnel function. See, and that's one of the things that Madam Chair and I talk about a lot, is this personnel function is so fractured in
Right.
Southborough, and everyone's got their little piece and their fiefdoms and the control, and Ms. Rosenblum has referred to the fact that, that we work towards the same goal but share different pieces of it, and so I think if you've got a charter, whether it be a town manager or a town administrator, it all depends on the charter and the authority. I think that's where you may see differences. Some towns have formal personnel directors, and quite honestly, it may be great someday if we moved in that direction, but that's down the road a piece if we're to have that discussion. But it does vary, but it is based on strength of charter.
So that really kind of
One other piece to
Yeah.
that, Claire, and thank you for your kind words before I forget. The Town Governance Study Committee recommended that we have an HR director, but recognize that in towns the size of Southborough, the budget may not support it. So the model would be to have the town administrator assume those responsibilities. So in our town administrator bylaw of 2013, the first paragraph of the duties of the town administrator deal with personnel. And he has authority to interpret, but not to overrule personnel board. It also does say something in there about working under our supervision or direction. We're still working that out. But the fact is, personnel board meets once, occasionally twice a month, and personnel goes on every day. So there's no way that we're going to replace the personnel director. That's why certain amendments have been made to the SAP when we hired a stronger town administrator. For example, Mark has authority, Mr. Purple has authority to, under the SAP, the default hiring rate is the minimum of the range. Mr. Purple has authority to go to midpoint, and it recognizes the exigencies of grabbing a good candidate. You're not going to wait 29 days till the personnel board meets again. We have authority to go to maximum, but in the interstices between meetings, so that's the way it's got to be done. So, and we do meet frequently and agree to disagree.
That's the one nice thing about this personnel board, is they've got a regular meeting schedule, which does make it a little more dependable in terms of when, certain things can be brought to them. So that helps out tremendously with the relationship.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your volunteer work.
Thank you for coming to our meetings. It's nice.
They're riveting. I recommend that everybody does.
Anybody else? So I've got one final question, Betsy, going back to your math on the 3-year average, the 1.6. So let's say you had one big range of one position, 11 to 45, you said? $11 to $45, which, let's see. So just pick one.
The
Give me
lowest range, grade 1, is, so this is all,
any range, I don't care. Pick one and tell me what the range is.
okay, election workers and under the new one, or the old, the one that we are that we approved from the consultant, the part-time or the full-time?
Just full-time. Pick one full-time, somebody in the middle, and give me the range for that level.
Okay.
I'll make this quick.
I'm sorry, I don't have the salary ranges memorized.
Well, you can make up one, too, just to,
I don't make things up. Okay, grade 1, minimum is 37,712, maximum is 49.
49?
That's full-time.
Okay, so $12,000, right, roughly, in
Okay.
between? Okay, so, are you saying that what you're trying to do, let's say somebody makes right at that max, 49, whatever, and they're gonna get a 2.5% raise, right? This year, so they're already at the max, they're gonna get 2.5%. So are you saying you need to up that top range to make sure that they still fit into that range, or is that not what you're saying?
I think there are a lot of issues. One of them is looking at whether or not SAP employees' actual salaries are within the salary ranges. This has not been examined. This is something that we're undertaking to do now.
Let's assume somebody is, but they're at the very top, right? And so now they're going to get 2.5% raise, and that 2.5% puts them over the top of that range. Is that why you're trying to adjust it by 1.6%?
in my opinion, they should be adjusted by the same amount, but that's not how it
I
worked
agree.
out
So I don't
this
see
year.
what good that 1.6, you know, especially if we haven't done it in 3 years. Why are we averaging 3 years? Why aren't
We
we doing
caught
this?
up last year.
Okay, so
we
we did
caught
catch
up last
Okay,
year.
so now we're picking,
We do need to examine a lot of these things, what happens exactly when, you raise an excellent point. I asked for a table of all SAP employees, so I could then fill in what the ranges are on the SAP and what they're actually being paid. My understanding is that prior to December 2018, this had not been done. It had not been looked at. So that's what I'm looking at now, to see if people are being paid in range.
okay, so I mean, this is a simple point. If you've got somebody at the top of the range and you're going to give them an increase of 2.5%, you got to get that range up there too. And I don't know why you'd pick 1.6 if you're going to do it 2.5, but we can talk about that another day.
I'm not going to be able to sit here and defend that everything we did was the
Alright.
absolute perfect bet. We're learning as we're going. We have 3 new members in 2018, so it's a great group, but there's a lot of catch up.
Understand. So I also appreciate you, as does, or ditto what Claire said. So I think you're doing a great job, and you
Thank
are
you.
So knowledgeable, and that's great. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry some of it sounds like mumbo jumbo. It's getting clearer.
Okay, so let's turn quickly to, we're going to go back and start voting on our articles again, okay? Yes, so you want this one? Then you and I are going to have to share this. Does anyone have the table that I passed out last time with them, written, so Martha can use it?
You need the routine and this
Yeah,
one?
here we go. Okay, so here you go, Martha.
Okay. Now I need you.
Okay, so everybody ready? Okay, so let's go to Article 4 and 5 are related. And the only reason I didn't want us to vote on that was because I wanted to understand those better. So both of them are dealing with what to do when we sell bonds at a premium, how you handle that premium. It's real money coming in the door. So the second article, we floated one big permanent bond that financed several things, including part of public safety, and we received a large premium. And the first thing you get to do is take that premium, and you offset your actual cost of issuing the bonds, and that's what the $315,000 of that article is. So Article 4 is just to basically mimic the new state law as far as what state law is saying we need to do with bond premium, which is we're supposed to offset the debt with it. So you get $500,000, you should reduce your debt, and if you needed $10 million, you should get $9.5 million and reduce your debt. So it says this is what you're going to use it for. You had flexibility, I guess, before, and that's all this is done. Bond council has approved this, I've been told. So there's not much more to say about this, and we're doing what the law says we have to do, and Article 5 just basically says that we want the premium that we received on that bond to offset those costs. Okay, so they're both related. Okay. So anybody want to talk about those further? Right. So who's going to do the motions tonight? So Chelsea, you want to
I'll
do
do the
motions?
motions, sure.
And then Judy,
I'll
you want to second them? Okay, so
You want me to do it?
you can do 4 and 5 together. They are
Okay.
related.
So I move to approve Articles 4 and 5.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 5-0. So everything's going out to 5 tonight, Martha, because Mr. Rooney's not here. Okay, so the next one is the one we just heard, Article 7 from the Personnel Board. So does anyone have any further questions so that we don't want to vote on this tonight, or does everybody think that we're ready to vote?
Ready.
Yeah, me too.
You ready? Okay, you ready? Okay. Chelsea, you ready?
So I still don't agree with the stipend portion, so I know I voted against it the other day. So does that mean I vote against?
The only
This?
way you're going to be able to vote against stipend is to, I mean, there's two places, it's in the budget, right?
Right.
So you could vote against the entire budget, and if you want to pull a
So you-
stipend.
Okay,
There's just not anything, there's no other way to vote against a stipend besides you could vote against this one because of that reason,
yeah,
right?
but you vote against the whole,
You have to for now, and then you can always try to amend that article at town meeting to pull out the stipend and then have the rest of it approved. So that's the only way to really get that stipend out of there. So if you don't like stipend, you should vote against it. I mean, that's the only way you can do tonight and we understand the reason. If somebody were to say, why did, one person advise, we say because of the stipend issue. So it'd be very easy to describe what
Okay.
happened. So that's what I do.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Okay. So I move that we approve Article 7.
Oh, so you're gonna, okay, so you're not gonna vote against
she's gonna vote
Oh,
against
you-
it.
You're still gonna
I'm
vote
just
against
moving
it.
that.
Okay, I second. Well, I agree with you.
Any further discussion on Article 7?
I,
Semino?
yes, I would just, I wouldn't wait for a question. I think you raise a good point, and when the article comes up at town meeting, it'll show, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1, if that's what this vote is about to be, and then I would encourage you to explain the one and the particular reasons why without waiting for a question. I think that would be helpful.
This one's been pretty controversial. There's been a whole lot of discussion about this one, so it'd be a healthy thing for you two to talk about.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for getting your here. Okay. All right, so we've got a motion.
on one of the votes, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, that's, it's good. It's healthy.
I gave up.
Did Judy second?
Judy
Yeah, I
second,
did,
and
did.
I
But
think we're done
having a
discussing.
private conversation.
Okay, all in favor of Article 7? So 1, 2, 3, ooh, okay, all opposed? 3-2.
Change my numbers here.
Yeah.
But there's no way we can signify that this is the particular issue. We have to go through.
Oh,
the
Mr.
whole-
Semino's saying yes.
know.
As
No,
soon
but
as
we
it,
have to then, but nonetheless, the risk of saying no to this is that we then open up the whole salary discussion.
it's a risk, but, it's still a healthy discussion to have. It's important.
Yeah, it's not worth it. I'm gonna change my vote. I'll vote in favor of it's just not worth opening all that up. I think it's,
Okay, so we're going to revote this. So
Let's revote.
all in favor of Article 7? 4? All opposed? Okay, so 4-1, Martha, instead of 3-2.
well,
Kathy,
Yes,
I have a question.
go ahead.
So on these votes, you mentioned this at the pre-town meeting earlier tonight. All of the ones that are under support, that was all 5-0, if I remember from a memo that somebody put out?
You're talking about Board of Selectmen?
Yeah. Is that correct?
No, I think that there were some that weren't 5-0.
I saw someplace that, okay, all right, I'll dig it up.
I mean, I don't have their votes here, but I know that they weren't all 5-0.
No, all Articles 29 through 36 were 3-1-0. All other articles were unanimous.
Right.
we do.
Okay, so they weren't all unanimous. He just, 29-36 were 3-1. Everything else was, I guess, either 4-0 or 5-0.
In the summary that Mr. Purple provided at pre-town meeting, there's a couple footnotes, the lower left corner.
Okay, all right.
All Board of Selectmen votes of support are
Right.
unanimous,
Yeah, that's
except
what I
for
thought.
29 to 36, which are 3-1-0,
Okay, all right,
with Ms. Faniff in opposition.
gotcha, okay. Thank you.
And they're going to show the votes. They're going to put it in the top right-hand corner
Mhm.
what the votes are, it sounds like. So anybody's got a ability to come up and ask what we did. Okay, so we're done with that one. Next one is Article 9. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Water Enterprise Fund?
Yeah.
We did 6-0. We did. Okay, so this says, Article 9 is, we're in the middle of negotiating 4 new union contracts. Mr. Purple's in the middle of that. He's got 3 out of the way. He's got 1 more to go. So there's going to be a number in this, it's my understanding, by the time we get to town meeting. We just don't know what that number's going to be because he's got to finish with the 4th one. What we didn't understand until recently is there is a number in the budget for this article. It's there. And we're not going to talk about it in public because he's negotiating with this, but there is a number there. So the question is whether the actual number will be more or less than what's in the budget. And that's what we'll find out once he finishes with the fourth one. Okay. So all we're doing now is saying, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We're going to get a number. We're not going to change that number. It's going to be negotiated. So I see no reason not to go ahead and vote on this one. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it.
Sorry, did you say that it's definitely not gonna go over what's already baked into the budget?
I didn't say that.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand.
Mr. Purple would prefer me not to say any more about this because
Okay.
he's trying to negotiate and he doesn't want to tip his hand to what he's doing. So we don't know if it's going to be more or less at this point. But there is a number in there. So it's
Okay.
not like it's going to be, a total gross new number. There is a
Yeah.
number in there.
Okay.
We don't know whether the total is going to be more or less until he finishes with the fourth one, and then he'll let us know.
So does this, so we're voting on that the article will be in the
Yeah,
warrant,
we're
not
just
the number
supporting,
in it? Okay.
there's not much to do on this one.
Okay.
If we don't support it, so, it's, it doesn't mean anything. Okay, so, Chelsea.
Okay. I move that we approve Article 8.
Second. 9.
Sorry. I move
Article
that we
9?
approve Article 9.
It's 9.
Thank you.
Judy,
Second.
all in favor? So that's 5-0. Now, what I don't remember is, this only happens every 3 years or so. Mark, do you get up and describe in detail what is in the approved contracts, or do you just not say a whole lot?
So I usually get up and just give a quick overview of the agreements, a couple of bullet points, usually talk about what the COLAs are for the agreements, any language changes that have financial impacts. It's usually pretty brief.
So we're not ratifying the contracts here. That's not our job. We're just saying that whatever the number is, it needs to go in the warrant article, okay? All right, so there's that one. Okay, the next one I've got that we need to vote on.
Okay.
So Article 13 is going to be at town meeting because we're going to still be discussing that on March 5th. And so one thing I should have said is Mr. Purple has graciously agreed to hold the printing the warrant until tomorrow morning, until it goes off. So all of our votes that we do through tonight will be in the printed warrant, okay? But since March 5th is beyond that, both our support and selectmen support is going to be at town meeting for the capital article, because that's the primary reason we're going to be discussing on March 5th is that one, okay? So that one is just at town meeting, and that one's not changing.
What about Article 11?
11 is, we've already voted on, so that's actually support. That's just the general budget. So we didn't talk about that last week, but that we have voted on. Okay, so that's the operational budgets. So that's support, Martha.
Okay.
And that was 6-0. Okay, does everybody agree about Article 13, that's at town meeting? And we'll talk about it long before then, we'll know what we're gonna do. It's not, we're not gonna have to huddle at town meeting and start talking about the capital budget, but we just can't get it in the printed warrant.
Have the selectmen stuck with their approval of the larger amount for the library? Are they going for, on the capital budget? Are they going for 100,000, or are they going for the 4 something? Mark?
March 5th,
Oh, so they haven't, I thought they'd approved that.
still discussing.
Okay.
I still hope, Judy.
No.
Okay. Okay, the next one is easy. So this is, I just needed to have, I just needed to understand where the number came from because it was such an exact number. So long story short, this is a standing warrant article that they fund because they need to be able to provide money when people retire unexpectedly during the year. They've got accrued sick time and accrued vacation. And you never know for sure who's going to retire. You may have an idea, but, you know, people can surprise you, so they need to have some money there to do it. So this is, this number is predicting certain people are going to retire. So this is based on what they know at this point. So that's why it's such an exact number. Now, having said that, the warrant article that exists today doesn't have much money in it, and it's going to go negative by June 30th of 19 because of Joe Morrow's retirement. He's owed a lot of money for sick and vacation. So it's going to go negative, and so they're going to have to move some money around for 6/30/19 to bring that back to zero. So this is, there's nothing in it to add to this. This 39 is what Brian and Heidi thinks is the cost of people that are going to retire that they know about, okay? And there's no fat in that at all, right? Okay, all right. So nobody better retire besides who he thinks is going to retire.
So what
Okay.
happens if somebody does retire? Then do they have to go to the reserve fund? Is that, or,
They could, but they don't have to. They've got other choices. I mean, they could get it from that department's budget if there's some
There's
fat in
fat,
that, so,
okay.
we want them to come reserve fund last and try to find it within the department budget first. Okay, and that's what he's gonna do, I think, this year with, the negative piece of it. So, okay, anybody else wanna talk about the 39,435 in that article? Okay,
okay, I move to approve Article 14.
I second.
all in favor? So it's 5-0, Martha. Okay, so the next one is the revolving fund article. And again, we could have done this last week, but I still didn't understand where the numbers were coming from. You know, there's like 10 different revolving funds with specific max expenditures in it. And so I've talked to Brian and Heidi, you know, 5 times. I'm sure they're tired of me asking about it. So the numbers, there's no state law saying that those numbers have to be there. There used to be a state law talking about you couldn't expend more than 1% of your tax levy, which would have been $440,000 or so, but that's gone. So this is just a way to control the expenses. So this is Heidi's and Brian's numbers based on what these revolving funds usually need, usually expend. So if they want to do something wild and crazy, they really can't. They've got a max on what they can take out of that revolving fund as far as expenses go. So it's just a way to kind of control it. And so the numbers don't mean a whole lot, except that they look like what they've spent in past years. Okay, all right. This one is 17.
17.
So this is the revolving fund article, okay? And then, of course, this one's also adding the revolving fund for the golf course operations because of their need to, go ahead.
So I have a question on this. How is number 10,
Sorry.
that $30,000, do we know how that number was determined?
For the golf course?
Mm.
So based on the contract the town has with the company that's managing the golf course, they're required to pay us a certain monthly amount based on revenues they receive through fees. So if you take that and average that out probably over 7 months, 8 months, it comes in probably somewhere between 25 and 30. But again, that's all dependent on how many rounds they're selling.
So we think this is kind of the income that's going to come out of that fund after everything is paid, hopefully?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's first year for it, so, you know, wait and see what happens.
I just think if there's things that we need to do to that golf course that we can use from the money that's generated from the golf course rather than coming back to the taxpayers, we should take advantage of that.
Okay, so anybody else want to talk about the revolving fund max expenditures? So this is basically reauthorizing all of them, because you have to do it every year, adding the golf course on there, and then saying this is the most they can take out of their revolving fund. Okay. Chelsea?
I move that we approve Article 17.
A second.
All in favor? So 5-0. We are a unanimous group tonight, except for the stipend. That's okay. We should just read. Okay, so the next ones are all the CPC articles, 19 through 24. So I'm going to make a proposal. Why don't we try to approve tonight the ones that are either admin or are approving or trying to expend funds for previously approved projects, which is 19, 20, and 21. So there's nothing new in those. Okay, so that's the Burnett House, that's the admin article where they allocate the 10%, 10%, 10%, 5%. and then the Halloran land that they bought last year, okay? So there's nothing new in those. That's just basically saying they can do what we've already agreed that they can do, okay? Does that suit everybody? Do those? Yeah, do all three of those, and then we can hold the ones that actually deal with the new projects until town meeting, which is what the selectmen are doing too, till we can hear them on March 5th, okay? But again, we'll talk about it for time meeting. We'll know what we're going to do, but we just won't have it in the warrant article or on the printed warrant. Chelsea?
Okay, I move to approve Articles 19, 20, and 21.
Second.
All in favor? So 5-0, Martha, for all three of those. And everybody's okay holding 23 and 24 to town meeting?
22, 23, and 24,
So I
right?
missed one. 19, yeah, sorry. So 22, which are the three new projects.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody's okay with that? Okay, so Martha, 22, 23, and 24 are at town meeting. And that's what the selectmen are doing too, so. Okay, 26, we have agreed to hold to town meeting, so does anybody want to change that? That's the historical where they're changing the 15 days to 45 days as far as being able to hold the public hearing for a project. So we're okay with that still? Okay. All right, and I think that's it, unless I missed something.
We have-
Everybody
We turn-
disagree?
you have- No, 26 you're doing now, right?
26 is at town meeting. We just wanted, remember, we wanted to hear, give the public a chance to basically rebut what historical says as far as what it might do to them. When somebody's got a project to delay it from 15 to 45 days, so give people a chance. We seem to be supportive of it as far as what they, because we agree that they don't have enough time with 15 days. But is 30 days right, 45 days now? So let people have a chance to tell us why 30 is maybe a better number than 45. Okay, so that's the only, that one's easy. So I think we got them all, unless somebody disagrees. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Purple, thanks again for letting us do this so that we could get our, okay. I mean that sincerely, too. We,
Especially after what happened with Mr. Sumino earlier, with CPC. I'm glad we didn't just boycott 5 articles.
okay. All right, so I will email this to you. Did you get them already? You want me to email it to you? Okay, good. All right, so we're done. Okay, so that's it for the night, other than just another general discussion where I think we stand with the overall budget increase, so it's getting better and better and better. So Algonquin has, remember, the problem with Algonquin was that the division between the two towns was rather skewed. Northborough, sorry, Martha. Martha lives in Northborough, was almost 10% year over year, and we were, 1%. So they have gone back. Brian just showed me this tonight, so I don't know what they changed, but they reduced the overall budget, which we get about a third of. So anything that she reduces, we're going to save a third of that dollar. So it's gone down to, I think we've got a negative year-over-year increase right now. Hey, Brian, am I right? Yes? For Algonquin, it's negative, right?
Yes, it will, yeah.
Okay, negative 0.57 or something like that? Okay, so it's a negative increase year over year for Southborough, right? So I don't know where we're gonna end up, but if we end up with the library at 100,000 instead of 450, if we use 325 for Karen's number based on Chelsea's work, right? If we keep everything else the way it is, we were already down to like 2.5. Brian handed me this tonight without making those changes, and we're down to 2.4. So we're getting pretty close to 2% right now, which sounds like cost of living. We're getting to a number that you can pretty easily explain to the town that should go over pretty well, especially given where it started. And there's still people that think in town that it's like 8 or 9%. My neighbor was cleaning my teeth, and he said, I'm coming to that meeting because I'm not paying another 7%. I said, well, you can come to the meeting, and I don't think you're going to pay 7%, so, but please come. We'd love to have you there.
You said that while he was cleaning your teeth? That must have been true.
I did. Excuse me? What, Mark? Yeah. So anyway, so anybody else want to talk about anything? So the next meeting is March 5th with the Board of Selectmen. They've got a lot on the agenda, though, so I'm not sure what order things are going to be done. So we're there, but Jason's going to do a report. So they've got more than just us on that agenda, so hopefully we can get ours done. Maybe push to the front of it, close to the front, maybe? Have you put the agenda together for March 5th?
I sent that over to the chair tonight for a review.
So where is the part that we're interested in? Not that we're not interested in the whole thing, but the part that we're most interested in. Yeah.
I think there's a couple of smaller pieces before we get to you.
So it's pretty early?
They start at 6:30, it'll probably be 7:15.
Okay. All right. So the question is, does anyone want to continue meeting separately after that? Or do we just want to call it a night after we do that piece of it?
We're done.
I think we're pretty, so, and then the 12th, we're going to start working on our report, and what we're going to talk to about town meeting. So we'll be done with the budget piece of it on March 5th, right? And then we'll start talking about what we're going to say at town meeting, what our written report's going to look like, and what else we want to say in the oral piece of it, right? So we'll do that on the 12th, and then we can fine tune it on the 19th, and so we'll have 2 meetings to do it.
If you need support with that, ask me.
Yeah. But, we'll go back and forth, we'll circulate it, so we'll be able to work on it, between meetings too. Okay, all right. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds good.
Okay, all right. Okay, it's planned, so,
Move to adjourn.
yeah, we're getting.
I
there.
passed it on. No,
Okay.
she's.
I move,
There are
I move to
motions.
adjourn.
I get to second.
All in favor of adjourning at 9 o'clock? 5-0.
9 o'clock.
Very good.
Good job.
Okay,